No one paid much attention to the old photograph anymore. It had been hanging on the living room wall of the Harrison family for generations, protected behind dusty glass inside a worn wooden frame. Visitors would often glance at it for a second before moving on. To everyone, it looked like an ordinary family portrait taken sometime in the late 1960s. 8 people stood in front of an old country house, all wearing formal clothes, smiling proudly at the camera. There was nothing unusual about it, or so everyone believed. When the Harrison family decided to restore several old photographs before their annual family reunion, they contacted Daniel Brooks, a professional digital restoration expert known for repairing damaged historical images. Daniel had restored thousands of photographs during his career. Torn edges, faded colors, scratches, and water damage were routine challenges for him. He expected this picture to be another simple restoration project. He was wrong. As he scanned the original print into his computer at extremely high resolution, he zoomed in to remove tiny scratches that could not be seen with the naked eye. That was when something caught his attention. One of the young girls in the photograph wasn't looking toward the camera. Instead, her eyes were fixed slightly to the left, as though she was staring directly at someone standing just outside the frame. Daniel frowned Fossey. He examined the expressions of the other family members. 2 of them also seemed distracted. Their smiles looked forced, and their heads were turned by just a few degrees, almost as if they were aware of another person nearby. But there was no one there. He dismissed the thought at first. Old photographs often created strange visual illusions because of lighting, damaged film, or aging paper. Still, something felt wrong. Curious, Daniel increased the image contrast and adjusted the brightness. Hidden details slowly emerged from the faded background. Near the edge of the photograph, behind the oldest man in the picture, a faint shadow appeared. It wasn't part of the building. It wasn't a tree. It looked disturbingly similar to the outline of a human shoulder. Daniel leaned closer to the screen. His heart began to race. He repeated the scan several times, convinced it was a technical error. Every scan produced the same result. The shadow remained. The next morning, Daniel contacted the Harrison family. "Do you still have the original film negative?" he asked. The family searched through old storage boxes in the attic for hours before discovering a small envelope marked simply with the date the picture had been taken. Inside was the original negative. Daniel carefully placed it into a specialized scanner designed to capture every microscopic detail preserved in the film. When the scan finished loading, he stared at the monitor in complete silence. The original negative was different, very different. Standing beside the oldest man was the faint but unmistakable figure of another person. The figure wasn't completely clear, but enough remained to recognize a young teenager wearing dark clothing. Even stranger, every member of the family seemed naturally positioned around this person, leaving just enough space as though they had expected them to be there all along. Yet, every printed version of the photograph showed only 8 people. The teenager had somehow disappeared. Daniel checked every technical possibility: double exposure, film damage, chemical deterioration, scanning errors. Nothing explained what he was seeing. The missing figure existed only on the original negative. Someone had intentionally removed them from every printed copy. That raised a terrifying question: why? The Harrison family was shocked. The oldest surviving family member, 90-year-old Margaret Harrison, insisted she had never seen anyone else in the picture. "I've looked at that photograph," my entire life, she whispered. There were always 8 of us. Daniel carefully showed her the scanned negative. Her hands began trembling. She stared at the screen for several long seconds before quietly saying something that made everyone in the room uncomfortable. I don't remember this person, she said, but somehow she paused. They feel familiar. Silence filled the room. If someone had deliberately erased a person from every printed photograph, what else had been erased? Family records were searched. Birth certificates, letters, school photographs, newspaper articles, nothing. No name matched the mysterious teenager. No relative remembered them. No written record mentioned another person being present that day. It was as if the teenager had been completely removed from history itself. Daniel couldn't stop thinking about the discovery. That night, he enlarged one final section of the negative. As the image sharpened, another chilling detail appeared. The missing teenager wasn't smiling. While everyone else faced the camera, the teenager was staring directly toward the old house behind the family. And their expression wasn't one of happiness, it was fear. Daniel suddenly realized this wasn't just a damaged photograph. It was the first clue in a mystery that had been buried for more than 50 years. The discovery spread through the Harrison family faster than anyone expected. By the next afternoon, nearly every living member of the family had gathered inside the old country house where the mysterious photograph had been taken more than 50 years earlier. The restored image and the original negative lay carefully on the dining room table while everyone stared at the ghostly outline of the unknown teenager. No one could explain who he was. No one remembered inviting him. No one even recognized his face. Daniel Brooks watched quietly as family members passed the photograph from one person to another. Some insisted the shadow was only a flaw in the film. Others believed it was impossible for a person to disappear from every printed photograph. Then 90-year-old Margaret Harrison broke the silence. I've seen those eyes before, she whispered. Everyone turned toward her. She closed her eyes, trying to remember. I don't know where, but those eyes were frightened. Her words sent chills through the room. Daniel suggested they search every family record they could find. Boxes that had remained unopened for decades were carried down from the attic. Dust-covered old journals, handwritten letters, newspaper clippings, school certificates, and leather-bound photo albums. For hours, they searched. Nothing, not a single document, mentioned another teenager living with or visiting the Harrison family during that summer. Late that evening, Daniel noticed something unusual inside one of the oldest photo albums. Several pages had been carefully cut out, not torn, cut. Someone had intentionally removed photographs. The cuts were clean enough to suggest they had been made with a sharp blade. Who would do this? Daniel asked. No one answered. The missing pages only deepened the mystery. The following morning, Daniel visited the county archives. If the family had no records, perhaps the town did. Old census files, property ownership records, school enrollment lists, police reports. He spent nearly 6 hours searching through fragile documents stored inside dusty cabinets. Again, nothing. It was as if the mysterious teenager had never existed. Just as Daniel was preparing to leave, an elderly archivist approached him. You've been looking at Harrison records all day, the man said. Daniel nodded. I'm searching for someone who may have disappeared decades ago. The archivist hesitated. I don't know about a missing boy, he replied, but I do remember hearing stories about something strange at the Harrison estate. Daniel leaned forward. What kind of stories? The old man lowered his voice. They said someone vanished there during the summer of 1968. Daniel's heart skipped a beat. Was the case investigated? It was, the archivist answered, but nothing was ever proven. He disappeared into another storage room before returning with a faded newspaper dated August 1968. The headline read, "Local teen reported missing after." Its date gathering most of the article had faded beyond recognition. Only a few sentences remained readable. The missing teenager's name had been completely covered with black ink, not faded, covered. Someone had deliberately hidden it. Daniel immediately requested the original police file. The records clerk searched for nearly an hour before returning with disappointing news. The file no longer existed. According to official records, it had been destroyed years earlier after being labeled closed. Daniel knew something was wrong. Police files were rarely destroyed without reason. Someone had wanted this investigation to disappear. That evening, Daniel returned to the Harrison house with copies of the newspaper. Margaret studied the article for several minutes. Suddenly, her face turned pale. "I remember that summer," she whispered. Everyone looked at her. "There was a terrible argument." "Between who?" Daniel asked. Margaret shook her head. "I can't remember." She pressed her hands against her forehead. "I only remember everyone telling us children to stay inside the house." Another memory slowly surfaced. There was a boy. The room became silent. He wasn't family. He came here carrying something. What was he carrying? Daniel asked. Margaret closed her eyes again. A notebook. Before anyone could ask another question, the old grandfather clock struck midnight. The loud sound echoed through the empty house. At that exact moment, a strong gust of wind slammed open the attic door. Everyone jumped. Daniel grabbed a flashlight and slowly climbed the narrow wooden stairs. The attic was silent. Dust floated through the cold air. As he searched the dark corners, his light stopped on an old wooden chest, hidden beneath a torn blanket. The lock had already rusted away. He carefully lifted the lid. Inside were dozens of forgotten family belongings, old clothes, letters, broken watches. Then, beneath everything else, he found a small leather notebook wrapped inside faded cloth. Its cover carried only one sentence written in black ink. "If anything happens to me, the truth is inside." Daniel slowly opened the first page. Every person in the room held their breath. The mystery that had remained buried for nearly 60 years was finally about to speak. Daniel carefully lifted the fragile notebook from the chest. The leather cover cracked as he opened it, releasing the smell of old paper that had remained untouched for decades. Every page was filled with neat handwriting. At the bottom of the first page was a name, Thomas Reed. The room fell silent. No one in the Harrison family recognized it. Daniel turned to the next page. "My name is Thomas Reed. If you are reading this, I am probably gone. I have written everything I saw because I know someone will try to erase the truth." Everyone exchanged nervous glances. The notebook described the events of the summer of 1968. Thomas had been a 17-year-old student hired to help repair fences around the Harrison estate. One evening, while walking near the old oak tree behind the house, he accidentally witnessed two men burying a heavy metal box. The men didn't know he was watching, but Thomas saw their faces. He wrote every detail. He even drew a rough map showing the exact location where the box had been hidden. The final pages became increasingly desperate. "They know I saw them. They've followed me for 3 days. If anything happens to me, search beneath the old oak tree beside the broken stone well." Daniel immediately contacted the police. The next morning, investigators arrived at the abandoned estate with forensics specialists and excavation equipment. The old oak tree still stood exactly where Thomas had drawn it. After nearly 2 hours of digging, one of the officers struck something solid. It was a rusted metal chest. Carefully, the team lifted it from the ground. Inside were priceless historical artifacts that had been reported stolen from a local museum in 1968, along with old documents linking the theft to two men who had disappeared shortly after the crime. The evidence matched Thomas's notebook perfectly. Police reopened the forgotten missing person case. Using modern DNA technology, they compared samples from unidentified remains discovered years earlier with surviving relatives of Thomas Reed. Days later, the results confirmed the truth. The remains belonged to Thomas. After nearly 60 years, the missing teenager finally had his name returned to him. Investigators also discovered why no one remembered him. One of the thieves had secretly worked at the local photo lab.